The Mortuary Secret. Once upon a time, in a small village called Umuns, there lived a young girl named Ngozi. She was just 6 years old, with bright eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest night. One day, Ngozi went missing. Her parents, Mama Ngozi and Papa Ngozi, were worried sick. They searched everywhere but couldn't find her. The whole village joined in the search. They combed through the forest, checked the riverbank, and asked everyone if they had seen Ngozi. After 2 long days, a hunter named Chike found Ngozi lying lifeless under a big mango tree in the forest. Everyone was heartbroken. They rushed her to the village hospital, but the doctor shook his head sadly. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's nothing we can do. We have to take her to the mortuary." The mortuary attendant, Mr. Okoro, was a tall, quiet man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He always wore a white coat and moved silently like a ghost. The villagers said he had strange powers, but nobody knew for sure. Mama Ngozi and Papa Ngozi handed Ngozi over to Mr. Okoro with heavy hearts. Late at night, while everyone was asleep, something incredible happened. Ngozi woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around the cold, dark room. She was scared and wanted to go home. But Mr. Okoro had a dark secret. Whenever someone woke up in the mortuary, he wouldn't let them go. He believed that once a person entered the mortuary, they belonged there forever. He quietly took a syringe filled with a strange liquid and walked towards Ngozi. Ngozi saw him coming and started to cry. "Please, I want to go home," she begged. Mr. Okoro didn't say a word. His face was stern, and his eyes were cold. He grabbed her arm, ready to inject her. Just then, the lights flickered, and Ngozi's cries grew louder. The village's night watchman, Mr. Jide, who always made rounds to check on things, heard the noise. He was a curious man and decided to investigate. He tiptoed to the window of the mortuary and peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was little Ngozi, alive and crying, and Mr. Okoro about to inject her with something. Mr. Jide knew he had to act fast. He rushed to the door and banged on it with all his might. "Mr. Okoro, open this door," he shouted. "Open it now, or I'll break it down." Mr. Okoro hesitated, his hands shaking. Ngozi kept crying, her small voice echoing in the silent night. The tension was thick, and it felt like time had stopped. Mr. Okoro stood frozen, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't keep the door closed forever. With a deep sigh, he reluctantly opened the door. Mr. Jide burst in, his eyes darting from Mr. Okoro to Ngozi. "Mr. Okoro, what is going on here?" Mr. Jide demanded, his voice trembling with anger and fear. Ngozi, tears streaming down her face, reached out to Mr. Jide. "Please, take me home," she pleaded. Mr. Okoro tried to explain, but his words came out jumbled. She was brought here lifeless. She should not be awake," he stammered. Jide didn't buy it. He scooped Ngozi into his arms and backed away from Mr. Okoro. "You're coming with me, Ngozi. We're getting out of here." As they made their way out of the mortuary, Mr. Okoro's eyes followed them, a mix of fear and anger flashing across his face. He couldn't let his secret get out. He had to do something. Meanwhile, the village was quiet, everyone asleep, unaware of the drama unfolding. Mr. Jide, carrying Ngozi, ran through the empty streets, heading straight to Mama Ngozi and Papa Ngozi's house. He banged on their door, shouting for them to wake up. Mama Ngozi opened the door, her eyes widening in disbelief when she saw Ngozi in Mr. Jide's arms. "Ngozi, my baby," she cried, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. Papa Ngozi joined them, his eyes filling with tears. "How is this possible? We were told she was gone." Mr. Jide quickly explained what he had seen at the mortuary. Mr. Okoro was about to inject her with something. We need to find out what's really going on. The villagers started to wake up, lights flickering on as the news spread. A crowd gathered around Mama Ngozi and Papa Ngozi's house, all whispering and wondering about the strange events. Just then, Mr. Okoro appeared, his face shadowed by the moonlight. "She was supposed to be dead," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "You don't understand. This is a curse. Anyone who wakes up in the mortuary brings bad luck to the village." The crowd gasped, fear rippling through them. Mama Ngozi held Ngozi tighter, refusing to let her go. "You're lying. She's just a little girl," she shouted back, but Mr. Okoro's eyes were wild, and he looked around at the villagers, seeking support. "We must stop this. She cannot stay among us. She will bring ruin to us all." The tension grew, and the villagers were torn between believing Mr. Okoro and protecting little Ngozi. Mr. Jide stood tall, holding his ground. "This girl needs our help, not our fear. We need to find out the truth." As dawn approached, the village elders were called to decide Ngozi's fate. The atmosphere was thick with suspense. What would they decide? Would they uncover the truth behind Mr. Okoro's dark secret? The villagers waited, hearts pounding, as the elders began their deliberation, knowing that whatever they decided would change humans forever. The village elders, a group of wise and respected men and women, gathered in the central square. Chief Amadi, the oldest and most revered elder, stood at the forefront. He raised his hand for silence, and the crowd hushed instantly. "Bring the child forward," Chief Amadi commanded. Mama Ngozi, clutching Ngozi tightly, stepped forward with Papa Ngozi by her side. Ngozi's wide eyes looked around, confused and scared. Chief Amadi knelt to Ngozi's level, his eyes kind but serious. "My child, do you remember anything from when you were in the forest?" Ngozi shook her head slowly. "I was playing, then I fell asleep under the mango tree. When I woke up, I was in the dark room." Chief Amadi nodded thoughtfully. He turned to Mr. Okoro. "You claim there is a curse. Explain yourself." Mr. Okoro, sweating and nervous, swallowed hard. "Many years ago, a girl woke up in the mortuary just like Ngozi. The next day, a great sickness spread through the village. People said it was because she came back from the dead. Since then, we have not allowed anyone to leave the mortuary if they wake up." The crowd murmured, exchanging fearful glances. Chief Amadi raised his hand again for silence. "Superstitions have no place here. We will investigate the truth. Mr. Jide, take Mr. Okoro and search the mortuary. Look for anything unusual." Mr. Jide nodded and, with two other villagers, led Mr. Okoro back to the mortuary. The rest of the villagers waited anxiously, whispering among themselves. Mama Ngozi and Papa Ngozi stayed close to Ngozi, comforting her as best as they could. In the mortuary, Mr. Jide and the others searched every corner. Mr. Okoro stood by, wringing his hands. Suddenly, one of the villagers, Kemi, found a hidden door behind a shelf. "Look here," she called out. They pushed the shelf aside and opened the door, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down to a basement. With lanterns in hand, they descended the stairs, their shadows dancing on the walls. At the bottom, they found a room filled with strange herbs, bottles of mysterious liquids, and old, dusty books. In the center of the room was a large, stone altar with symbols carved into it. "What is this place?" Mr. Jide asked, his voice echoing in the basement. Mr. Okoro, now pale and trembling, muttered, This is where we kept the curse at bay. The herbs and potions were meant to protect the village." Mr. Jide picked up one of the books and flipped through the pages. "These aren't protection spells. These are curses. You've been using dark magic." Mr. Okoro's eyes widened in horror. "No, it can't be. I was told these were to keep us safe." Mr. Jide's face hardened. You've been deceived. These spells could have caused more harm than good. Back in the village, the elders and villagers waited for news. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the square. Just as the tension reached its peak, Mr. Jide and the others returned, carrying the book and some of the herbs. Chief Amadi examined the items, his expression grave. This is indeed dark magic. We must cleanse our village of this evil. The villagers gasped, realizing the true danger they had been in. Mama Ngozi hugged Ngozi tighter, relieved that her daughter was safe. Chief Amadi continued, we will perform a cleansing ritual to rid our village of this darkness. Mr. Okoro, you will be held accountable for your actions, but first, we must ensure the safety of our people. As preparations for the ritual began, the villagers felt a mix of fear and hope. The mystery was unraveling, but the danger was not yet over. What would the cleansing ritual reveal? Would Ngozi be safe? The answers were still to come, leaving everyone on edge, waiting for the final resolution. As night fell, the villagers gathered in the central square, surrounding a large bonfire. The elders stood in a circle, chanting ancient prayers and casting herbs into the flames. The air was thick with the scent of burning sage and the crackling of the fire. Chief Amadi raised his staff, calling for silence. Tonight, we cleanse our village of the dark magic that has plagued us. We call upon the spirits of our ancestors to protect us and guide us. Mr. Jide stood beside Mr. Okoro, who was bound with ropes. Mr. Okoro's eyes darted around, filled with fear and regret. Please, I didn't know, he whispered, but no one paid him any attention. Ngozi clung to Mama Ngozi, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Papa Ngozi stood protectively beside them, his face stern. The villagers held their breath, waiting for the ritual to begin. Chief Amadi began to chant louder, his voice echoing through the night. The other elders joined in, their voices blending into a powerful, haunting melody. The flames of the bonfire grew higher, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding huts. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a gust of wind blew through the square, extinguishing all the torches except for the bonfire. The villagers gasped and stepped back, eyes wide with terror. From the darkness, a faint whispering could be heard, growing louder and more distinct. It was the voice of the spirits, answering Chief Amadi's call. The whispers formed words, ancient and powerful, filling the air with a sense of awe and fear. The curse is broken, the spirits intoned. But the darkness lingers. Beware, for the one who brought it must atone. Chief Amadi stepped forward, his face set in determination. Mr. Okoro, you must face the consequences of your actions. The spirits demand atonement. Mr. Okoro fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, forgive me. The villagers watched, torn between anger and pity. Chief Amadi turned to the crowd. We are a community, and we must decide together. What should be done with Mr. Okoro? A murmur ran through the crowd as they debated. Some called for mercy, while others demanded justice. Finally, Mama Ngozi stepped forward, holding Ngozi's hand. Mr. Okoro must be held accountable, but we should also show compassion. Let him help us rebuild and make amends for his actions. The villagers nodded in agreement, appreciating Mama Ngozi's wisdom. Chief Amadi raised his staff once more. So be it. Mr. Okoro will work to repair the harm he has caused, under the watchful eye of the elders. The spirits' whispers grew softer, their presence fading. Balance has been restored, they said. But remember, the light and the dark are always intertwined. Stay vigilant, and protect each other. With that, the wind died down, and the night grew still. The bonfire flickered, casting a warm glow over the village. The tension lifted, replaced by a sense of relief and unity. Jide untied Mr. Okoro, who bowed his head in gratitude and shame. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right, he said. As the villagers dispersed, Mama Ngozi, Papa Ngozi, and little Ngozi walked home, their hearts lighter. The danger had passed, but the memory of the night's events would linger, a reminder of the power of community and the importance of staying vigilant. As the night drew to a close, Ngozi climbed into her bed, safe and sound. Her mother kissed her forehead and whispered, "Good night, my brave girl. Sleep well, for you are the light that guides us all." And so, the village of Umans slept peacefully, knowing that they had the strength to face any darkness that might come their way, united in their resolve to protect and care for each other. Moral lesson: fear and ignorance can lead to dark times, but courage, unity, and compassion have the power to overcome any evil. Embrace the truth, stand together, and always show mercy and forgiveness to those seeking redemption.